So today's video is going to be on Brexit. As you probably already know, Brexit is when the UK voted and decided to leave the European Union. And it may seem like something that is a little bit dated and no longer time relevant. The reality is the UK is now actually going through the process of leaving the European Union. And some of the ramifications that were talked about during the actual voting process are now starting to come into effect. And this video is going to talk a little bit more about those and why ultimately it was a very bad decision on the UK's part to leave from a financial and economic standpoint. I know there's a lot of discussions about the social issues and all of those things. I'm not dealing with that. This is purely an economic analysis of what Brexit means for the UK. And just to start this off, if you don't know what the European Union is, effectively after World War II, all of the countries, or the vast majority of countries in Europe, got together and decided we're going to create a union of countries so that we have a unified body for decision making when it comes to trading, economic standpoints, social issues, effectively to bring everyone together and in order to try and prevent future conflicts like World War II. A huge part of what came out of that is it was a unified trading body where you would have workers could move between countries freely. There was a lot of prosperity transferred between trade. And so, why did Britain decide to leave the European Union? A lot of that didn't actually have to deal with the economic issues. And it's very much unfortunate for the UK for leaving because you can look at the European Union just as an analogy, actually a lot like a workers' union. It certainly had issues, much like a workers' union typically will have. Keeping on with that analogy, let's say you have a working union. Some of the issues you might come across is the union might defend a worker who isn't exactly top quality, who isn't pulling their weight, may not be that skilled, but because they're a union member, they fight for them and defend them, even though there's other people that have other issues that should be prioritized. That might be, say, a limitation of a workers' union. But when you start to factor in the fact that they fight for higher wages, they ensure that you have benefits like maternity leave, vacation time, and then they also fight for worker safety and a variety of other benefits. When you factor the good and the bad, typically, workers' unions' good benefits outweigh the bad issues that they have. That's kind of what the European Union is like for those countries. There are definitely some issues. When you look at what happened to Greece, they were very irresponsible with their money. They made some very bad decisions where they spent a lot more than they had and they got themselves into a huge hole and the European Union had to bail them out. That was an issue. That's a bad side effect of the European Union. But when you stack up the benefits and look at what they do for the ability to negotiate as one trading body. So instead of one or two countries negotiating trade deals with America, it is the combination of every single country in the European Union negotiating as one with America, with Canada, with China, and that provides a lot of power, a lot of negotiating power. It also allows for prosperity in that you can trade between countries freely, which ultimately, as I've mentioned in previous videos, when you have globalism where you're sharing ideas, sharing products, it helps benefit everybody. So, some of the issues with Brexit that the UK is going to face, and they're going to face in the near future, is the idea that they're not going to be prioritized with trade deals. So, because they were a part of the European Union, they had these negotiations and these trade deals set up by the European Union with a variety of different countries. Because the European Union was so large and was such a significant trade partner, because there were so many countries within it, a lot of countries wanted to set up agreements with them, where they could set up trade agreements, reduce tariffs, and all of these benefits, and benefit together. The issue is, now that the UK is separated, they're their own entity. They have to negotiate their own trade deals. And the problem is, a lot of countries are going to look at it from a sense of, well, I'm going to prioritize the European Union first because they're much larger, they have a lot more countries, and they have a lot more potential over the UK. So countries that were looking at dealing with the UK initially might push them back. They might say, okay, we'll negotiate with you in a couple of years, but we're not going to prioritize making deals with you because you're less significant than, say, the European Union. That's the first issue. The second issue with that is they have a lot less negotiating power. So again, going back to that union negotiation, or workers' union example, when you have one worker who's negotiating, say, their salary, they don't have a lot of power. The employer can go, well, you know what, that's a little bit too much. We might just get a new person, replace them. But when you have a union of, say, 500 employees, that's a lot more power because you can't simply go out and replace them all. There's rules and regulations, and you have a bigger voice. Well, the UK is a very large economy. It's definitely that. But they no longer have as much negotiating power because they aren't have 40 countries behind them. They're much smaller now in comparison to how they were with the European Union. So they're going to have more issues with trading because they don't have as much influence and they don't have as much backing and reasoning on why they can demand certain things in trade deals. So not only is it going to be harder for them to get trade deals because they're going to be deprioritized compared to the European Union, it's actually going to be harder for them to get good trade deals as well. And another huge issue was the idea of cost associated with Brexit. A huge thing that was sort of touted during the Brexit conversation, whether they should leave or stay, is the idea of how much it cost them. And the exact amount, I can't remember specifically, but I believe it was around 160 million. Now that may seem like a huge number. It is a significant amount of money, especially for an individual. It seems like an insane amount of money. But when you're dealing with a country with millions of people that trades with a ton of other countries, when you look at what they were getting in return for that $160 million, it was incredibly cost effective. With the trade deals that they negotiated, the trade procedures, all of the benefits they received from that trade, it was well worth what they were paying. And now that they have to negotiate these trade deals on their own, and they have to effectively go out on their own, it's actually ultimately going to probably cost them more. So from a monetary standpoint, it makes no sense. From a trade standpoint, it also makes no sense. And another issue that has sort of presented itself now, prior to the Brexit vote, there was actually a Scottish independence vote. And it was actually a very narrow decision in which the Scottish country and people decided to stay in the UK. Now, the issue is that the vast majority of individuals in Scotland actually want to stay a part of the European Union. And so there's likely to be a second referendum vote which will almost certainly pass and Scotland will secede from the UK. Now, this is definitely not going to devastate the UK in any form, economic-wise. Scotland doesn't represent a huge amount of what they produce, but it's kind of like another log added to the fire. There really are no positive benefits for the Brexit vote, and you can debate whether the social conditions justified it, but ultimately Brexit was a very terrible decision the UK made from an economic standpoint, and going forward it's going to present a lot of issues for them that there really aren't easy solutions for. Hopefully that sort of puts a bit of perspective into what the Brexit's effect had, and it sort of sheds a little bit of light on what kind of possibilities, decisions Trump's making right now with economics and leaving NATO and things like that, what kind of ramifications there can be. These trade deals are put in place to be mutually beneficial, and in most cases, in most areas they are. And so threatening to leave these agreements really does not help either country long term and shed some light on what kind of potentially can happen with what's going on in the world, with people trying to become protectionists where they're protecting their economies and cutting themselves off. As always, if you like the video, please share, like, and subscribe. It helps me create more content. And if you have any comments or feedback, feel free to leave it in the comment section below.